sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth. And every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hey guys, it's Robin. You're listening to We Saw the Devil. And I am here with a bonus episode because I just finished watching Netflix's My Father, the BTK Killer. It dropped today, and I have to say that I've been looking forward to this one for a while. And look, I thought I knew the full story. We all know BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill, Dennis Rader, the sick asshole who murdered at least 10 people back in Wichita, Kansas. And this was about 2 decades ago. Almost every true crime podcast has covered this. We've heard it all before. Another serial killer, another documentary, another podcast episode. Except this one hits different because this actually isn't really about him. This is primarily about his daughter, Kerri Rawson. And holy hell, her story is devastating in a way that most true crime, for me at least, just isn't. Skye Borgman directed this. She's the one behind Unknown Number, the recent Catfish show that went viral, Girl in the Picture, and Abducted in Plain Sight. So you know she doesn't mess around. And My Father, the BTK Killer, is an hour and 33 minutes long. And I'm not going to lie, it feels longer because every second of it just sits there on your chest. But before we get into it, I'll just do really quick housekeeping. Again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. I'm your host, Robin. If you're not already, please follow the show on Instagram. You can do that at We Saw the Devil Podcast, on Facebook at We Saw the Devil, and then also on Twitter. I refuse to call it X, as We Saw the Devil. In terms of schedule, on Sunday, there will be an episode of Red, White, and Bruised, the new political series that I started. And there's a lot to talk about this week, guys. There is a lot to talk about this week. And this show is really just a place for me to express my political thoughts, opinions, and kind of analyze the events that are going on in this country right now. And I don't know how many of you are just really tired of living through unprecedented times. I would like some precedented times for a change. I would like to go back to some sense of normalcy because what we're living in right now is far from normal. But in any case, new episode of Red, White, and Bruised will be dropping on Sunday. I'm also recording with Iris on Sunday, and we each picked a horror movie that we were going to review. I picked the scariest movie that I have seen. It's called The Dark and the Wicked. Iris has never seen that, so she's going to watch it. And then she picked Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney. I haven't seen that, so we are going to watch and then convene and discuss them. So that will be coming out likely on Monday. Hopefully you won't be tired of me. If you think you will be, just, I guess, pace yourself. I don't know. But that's it. Let's just go ahead and get into this. Kerri Rawson's world as she knew it ended on February 25th of 2005. She was 26, married, living in Michigan. There's a chocolate bundt cake on her kitchen counter that she baked the night before. You know, normal life stuff. Then an FBI agent shows up in her kitchen and drops the bomb. Is your father Dennis Rader? Basically, he's been arrested, and your dad is wanted for murders in Kansas. Just like that, no warming, no build-up. Hey, good afternoon, your dad's a serial killer. And she describes how she couldn't breathe. And honestly, who could? Imagine standing there thinking about your dad, your boring, normal Boy Scout leader dad, and being told that he's one of the most sadistic killers in American history. 7 hours later, Dennis Rader started confessing to everything. And what destroys me about this documentary is that Kerri doesn't give us the easy narrative. She doesn't pretend her childhood was some Stephen King novel where all the red flags were obvious, because they weren't. She talks about how people always ask her, and it's the question she absolutely hates. How did you not know? And you know what? That question is absolute garbage, because she didn't know. Her mom, who slept next to this man for 34 years, also didn't know. 95% of the time, Dennis Rader was apparently a good dad and a loving husband. And that's the thing about psychopaths. They're not exactly walking around with a scarlet letter of serial killer. They blend in. They're your neighbor, your church buddy, your dad. Have you guys seen the latest TikToks coming out of California? Over a dozen women are now reporting that there is some guy out there who's basically trying to Ted Bundy women. He has his arm in a sling. He is trying to move something from his car to his trunk. He's asking women who walk by, hey, can you help me? And they say that they just get a really, really, really bad, creepy feeling about it. And he's now been caught over a dozen times. And the picture of him, he looks normal. Normal as can be. This documentary shows home videos, family photos, Kerri dancing with her dad to John Denver, family vacations in the Grand Canyon, church on Sundays. That was real. Those were real happy memories. And now they're all poisoned and tainted. And for me, the fascinating part of the documentary is where it gets a little twisted, because there were signs. And looking back, Kerri can see them now, but at the time, it just seemed like your dad being weird. Like when they were on vacation in Southern California in 1986. Dennis apparently spotted some dusty footprints on a car parked under their motel balcony, and he went into full paranoid mode. He was convinced that someone broke into their room, makes up a password for the whole family to use before entering their room. At the time, weird dad behavior. Now, he was projecting. And his job at ADT Security Services? The guy who was obsessed with home security got a job installing alarm systems. Perfect cover story, right? Except he was actually using it to learn how to break into homes. He worked at ADT from 1974 to 1989, right smack in the middle of his killing spree. And then the violent outbursts. Kerri talked about how you could see it coming. His eyes would change from sea green to dark and cloudy. One Labor Day during her freshman year of college, she watched her dad lunge across the dinner table and choke her brother Brian out until his face turned white. Terrifying? Absolutely. But it happened rarely enough that people just thought he had anger issues, not, oh, dad's probably out murdering people issues. And the show includes interrogation footage of Dennis Rader, and watching him talk is absolutely chilling. If you've seen his courtroom footage where he's just so matter-of-fact about how he killed them, he's just as matter-of-fact about it in the interrogation tapes. He called his victims projects. Projects! Like they were a home improvement task on his fucking to-do list. And one of his victims was the sweet grandmotherly woman who lived down the street from him, from his family. Rader broke into her house, strangled her, then took Polaroids of her body in bondage. And then what did he do? He went home, made dinner with his family, and helped the kids with homework like it was just another Tuesday. From Kerri Rawson's perspective, can you imagine being in her shoes? Because how does she even begin to process that? And I think most people know how he got caught by sending the discs, right? Because it's almost comedic if it wasn't so fucking horrific. So BTK stopped communicating in 1979. Everyone, law enforcement, most people assumed that he was dead or locked up somewhere else on another charge. But in 2004, his ego couldn't take it anymore. He needed the attention. So he started sending messages again. And if you guys remember, he sent this weird list of details about himself to the media. Things like his grandfather fought in World War II. Someone in his family plays the fiddle. He lives near train tracks. And Kerri actually read about BTK online that year, and that list stuck with her. Something about it felt off, like deja vu, and she couldn't shake it. In hindsight, every single item on that list pointed to her dad. But who thinks that way about their own father? And the thing that brought him down was a floppy disk. This genius asked police if a floppy disk could be traced. They were like, no, and lied. And he sent them one. They traced it back to the church, last user Dennis. They matched Kerri's DNA to semen found at the crime scene, and boom, game over. Dennis Rader is outed as BTK. He was arrested at 59 years old, driving home for lunch. And you know what his first words were? "Would you please call my wife? She was expecting me for lunch." But what this documentary really digs into is Kerri's nightmare since that day. PTSD, anxiety, depression. She's got the full collection. Unfortunately, it's kind of a Pokemon situation of gonna catch 'em all. And my heart bleeds for her, for even having to go through that because no human should. For weeks, she couldn't even say the words serial killer out loud. Not even to her husband. The words just wouldn't come. And here's what gets me. 2 weeks after his arrest, she wrote him a letter. "No matter what you may have done or not done, you were my father and I love you. You raised me and Brian as well as any man could." And she kept writing to him. Through his arraignment, through his trial, through all the disgusting details coming out in court about what he'd done to those people. He got the max sentence because Kansas didn't have the death penalty at that time. And you know what? Kerri has never visited him, never called him, just letters. That's it. And in the documentary, she talks about how he still doesn't understand why she won't visit. Why the family can't just go back to normal. Like he just shoplifted or something instead of, torturing and murdering 10 human beings. Plus more. He genuinely doesn't get it. That's not manipulation. That's true delusion. And then here's a gut punch. Kerri has 2 kids, a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And when her daughter asked why she only has one grandpa, Kerri told her that he's in jail for a super long timeout, like permanent timeout. But her kids don't know the truth. They've seen pictures of grandpa. They know he writes letters, but they have no idea their grandfather is one of America's most notorious serial killers. And how do you tell your kids that? When do you tell them that? Do you wait until they're teenagers? Do you do it gradually so they don't accidentally Google their mom at school and have their world implode? There's no parenting book that covers how to tell my children their grandfather is a serial killer. And what I also didn't realize is that there might be more victims. In 2023, Dennis Rader was named as the suspect in at least 2 other cases. A BTK task force was formed, and Kerri is on it. She's been working with investigators, including Nancy Grace and Paul Holes, trying to figure out if her dad killed more people than he admitted to. The documentary shows footage of her visiting him in prison recently to ask him directly about potential victims. Can you imagine sitting across from your own father, the man who taught you how to ride a bike, who walked you down the aisle, and asking him, "Dad, did you kill even more people than you told us about?" That takes a level of strength and mental fortitude that I cannot even fathom because I don't possess it. And what I really, really respect about this documentary is that Skye Borgman didn't exploit Kerri's story. She didn't turn it into true crime porn or some murder of the week episode. Kerri had real control over her narrative. That shows, and that matters. Because most true crime glorifies the killer. People obsess over them. They give them cute little acronyms. They try to understand them. Meanwhile, the victims become footnotes, and the families are largely left behind. They're invisible. Kerri wrote a memoir in 2019 called A Serial Killer's Daughter. And when she told her dad about it, he had the nerve to ask if they could make it a joint project. She shut that shit down hard. This is her story, her life, her trauma. And she had to get legal permission to publish his prison letters in her book because, and this is insane, even though she physically has the letters, he legally still owns them. So even from behind bars, he's still got his claws in her life. Kerri's also reached out to other families dealing with this nightmare. Like earlier this year, she met with the family of Gilgo Beach suspect Rex Heuermann, specifically his daughter Victoria, because who else can understand what that's like? She said, her and I's reality is we're never going to be able to separate ourselves from our fathers. I know in the bottom of my heart, my father loved and cared for us and protected us, but he also, I know in the bottom of my heart, committed murder. Both things are true. He was a loving father and he's a monster. And those realities exist simultaneously, and Kerri has to live with that contradiction every single day. Look, this documentary is not for everyone. I'm seeing a lot of reviews online of people saying it's boring and they're whining and that it focuses too much on Kerri instead of the murders. And to those people, I would like to say to you, you are missing the point entirely. We don't need another documentary jerking off to a serial killer's crimes. We don't need another psychological profile of a monster. We need to hear from the people whose lives were shattered by it, the ones picking up the pieces. Kerri is still healing. 20 years after her dad's arrest, she's still processing, still trying to figure out who she is when her entire childhood was built on lies. She even says in the show, quote, "It's hard to know who I am if every moment in my life was a lie." And that's what makes me so sad. How do you reconcile the dad who danced with you to John Denver with the man who strangled a grandmother down the street and took sick photos of her body? How do you hold both of those truths in your head without losing your mind? If you're going to watch this, and you should, understand that it's not about the murders. It's what comes after. It's about a daughter trying to understand how evil was her father's face. It's about trauma, identity, forgiveness, and the impossible task of loving someone who did the unforgivable. Kerri hasn't abandoned her father. And I can only say this as someone who hasn't experienced it. If I had found out that my father was a serial killer, I'm pretty sure I would have watched the gate slam shut and I never would have reached out, talked to, spoken to, or contacted him again. But she still writes to him. She loves him in some painful, complicated way. But she also knows that he can never be part of her actual life. He's now been in prison for 20 years and he is going to die there. And maybe that's the most tragic part of this. You know, Dennis Rader didn't just destroy his victims' lives. He destroyed his own family, his wife, his kids. His grandkids will never know of him. All of it gone. My Father, the BTK Killer, is streaming on Netflix right now. Again, it's directed by Skye Borgman and based on Kerri Rawson's memoir. Because these are the stories that need to be told. The ones about the wreckage they live behind. The people fighting to survive after the worst thing imaginable happens. Kerri Rawson is one hell of a survivor, and her voice matters more than her father's ever will. It came out today, and a lot of the reviews have been tepid at best, saying that it's boring, not what they expected, blah, blah, blah. So just be aware, this is about Kerri's journey, but I would give this an 8 out of 10. And that's it, guys. I just wanted to come drop my 2 cents here. Again, new episode of Red, White, and Bruce coming on Sunday. And then on Tuesday, horror movie episode with Iris. And then We Saw the Devil continues next week as well. If you're not following on Instagram, We Saw the Devil podcast. That's it, guys. Until next crime.